All right, we're back in the Press Box Podcast. It's time for episode number 46, and in this episode, we're going to break down our semifinal matchups in our quest to crown the greatest Super Bowl champion of all time. And we're going to start with the AFC, where we'll look at the 2004 Patriots versus the 78 Steelers, and then we'll break down the NFC semifinals matchup. The NFC Finals matchup to get to the championship game. That'll be the 89 49ers and the 86 Giants. So we'll break that down and talk a little bit and preview our finals matchup once we decide who wins those at the end of the episode. And without further ado, let's get into this episode, number 46 on the Press Box Podcast.
Okay, so it's time now for our semifinal bracket of our Super Bowl champions bracket. We're trying to find the greatest Super Bowl champion of the Super Bowl era, from Super Bowl I all the way through Super Bowl 54, which was just concluded. I'm Ralph Miranda. I'm joined by my co-host Joseph Miranda and our producer Nathan Miranda. And before we get started, let me recap, as I do before every episode, how we did this. Similar to our baseball, our World Series champion, we all sat down individually and we listed 8 teams that we thought should be on the AFC side of the bracket, 8 Super Bowl champions, and 8 NFC champions that we thought should be on the NFC side of the bracket. We compared our 3 lists. If all 3 of us agreed on a team or picked the same team, that team was in. If 2 of us picked a team and 1 didn't, we probably entered that team after some discussion. But then if there were teams on each of our lists that no one else had on the list, we had a serious discussion about those teams. When we arrived at our final 8 on the AFC and our final 8 on the NFC, we seeded them by winning percentage. And if their winning percentage was the same, we broke the tie with offensive and defensive ranks. So once again, on our AFC side, our number 1 seed was the undefeated 1972 Miami Dolphins. Our number 2 seed was the 1976 Oakland Raiders. Our number 3 seed was the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers. Our number 4 seed was the 2004 New England Patriots. Our number 5 seed was the 1998 Denver Broncos. Our number 6 seed was the 1968 New York Jets. Our number 7 seed was the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. And our number 8 seed was the 2006 Indianapolis Colts. Since you've been listening to our podcast, you know we're now down to our final 2 in the AFC. On the AFC side of the bracket, it's the 3rd seed 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers versus the 2004 New England Patriots. The Steelers advanced by defeating the 1976 Oakland Raiders 24-14, and the 2004 New England Patriots advanced by beating the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Nathan, you want to set the matchup for us?
Yes. We have the 2004 New England Patriots went 14-2, first in the AFC East, coached by Bill Belichick. They beat the Colts in the divisional round that year. They beat the Steelers in the championship, the conference championship, and they beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl 24-21. And the 1978 Steelers went 14-2 as well, first in the AFC Central. They were coached by Chuck Noll. They beat the Broncos in the divisional round. They beat the Houston Oilers in the conference championship, and they beat the Cowboys 35-31 in the Super Bowl.
Okay, so we're ready to go. Joseph, I'll give you the floor so you can get us started.
All right, so this is, I think, a very tough matchup. Not too dissimilar from the Patriots versus 72 Dolphins matchup. In that you've got 2 really good coaches going against each other here, Belichick and Chuck Noll. I think I'd give the edge to Belichick, but Chuck Noll is nothing to sneeze at, as Nathan likes to point out. You got to give the edge to Brady over Bradshaw. Okay, Bradshaw did win 4 Super Bowls, but I just don't think 4 is less than 6, first of all, and I just don't think he's overall as good a quarterback as Brady is, throughout his career. So you give the edge to quarterbacks for the Patriots. I think running backs should give it to the Steelers. Franco Harris is definitely a not just because of the immaculate reception, just he's one of the better running backs in NFL history. He's kind of more well known than I think it was Corey Dillon that year for the Patriots. He had a good season, but I just don't think he stacks up the same to Harris. And then receiving wise, you got to give it to the Steelers. And we've mentioned the duo of Swan and Stallworth quite a bit. And the Patriots have, one of the things they were kind of known for in that run is just finding essentially receivers off the scrap heap. And Brady got them the ball and they spread the ball around up until the point where they got Randy Moss, but he wasn't there yet in 2004. So that's, you look at that, the offense may be kind of a wash, but Steel Curtain defense, I think you give the edge to them over the Patriots defense, right?
Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this matchup, and as you said, it's probably one of the more difficult ones that we faced, not only in the Super Bowl bracket, but also in the World Series bracket. And I agree with everything you said. I think, for me, what turns this matchup, as you said, is the Steelers' defense. And what I mean by that is we all know now after the fact that the way that you beat Tom Brady is you have to pressure him, but you have to pressure him with 4 guys. If you blitz him, he's going to find a way to pick you apart. He's going to get rid of that football, and you're going to be exposed. The New York Giants obviously proved that the way you beat him is by rushing 4. And I think the Steelers, when you look at their defensive line, it arguably is one of the greatest in NFL history. When you look at Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Dwight White, Steve Furness. I mean, these guys were all pro players, 3 of them Hall of Fame guys. And I think if anybody can pressure Tom Brady with 4, it would be the Steelers. And then you look at their secondary. I mean, you look at Mel Blount. You look at Mike Wagner. You look at, who are some of the other guys? Ron Johnson. You look at some of those guys out there. Donnie Shell. Donnie Shell, probably, he's not in the Hall of Fame, but had he been on any other team by himself, he probably would have been a Hall of Famer. So I just think the Steelers' defense is the key here. And when you look at their ranking, the Steelers' defense was 3rd overall in the league in total yards. They were 12th in the league in yards passing, but that's because most teams didn't throw the ball very much. And they were 2nd in the league against the rush. And I just don't know if the Patriots can really score enough points if they can keep Brady clean enough for them to be able to put enough points on the board. Then you look at offensively. I mean, the Patriots. I mean, they had a pretty good offense, but you look at that Steelers offense and you look at some of the guys they had. I mean, Franco Harris, 1,000 yards rushing. Rocky Bleier, 633 yards rushing. They also caught the ball out of the backfield. Those were their 2 big runners. They had Sidney Thornton, didn't have a lot of yards rushing, but he was kind of their change of pace guy rushing the football. I think the Steelers will run the ball, and with their receivers, as you've said, and being better than the Patriots receivers, I just think they'll find a way to win this football game. It's hard for me to believe that the Steelers defense will allow the Patriots to put a lot of points on the board. And let me ask you this question before I let you talk. Would you say that this Steelers defense that we're talking about right here was better than the 2007 New York Giants defense?
Yeah.
Okay. And the New York Giants defense held the Patriots to what? 14 points, right? So that tells you something.
Better Patriots offense than the 04 offense.
Better Patriots offense than 04, that's true. But still, this is a much better Steelers defense.
That bodes even more well for them.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
This is a not as good offense overall.
Right.
That's a great point. The pressure thing applies throughout, but what rules are we playing under here? Are we playing under 78 Steelers rules or the current rules?
But actually, you're exactly right. But the 78 Steelers, of course, I'm an old guy, so I used to order these VHS tapes. That was back in the day when you had VHS and you had to order them from NFL Films. And the 78 Steelers championship tape was the Steelers took to the air. You remember, they changed the rules right before 78. The 74 and 75 Steelers were heavy run. 78 Steelers threw the ball because they relaxed the rules. So the rules are somewhat similar, okay? Not quite, but somewhat similar.
Oh, not so much that. I'm talking about roughing the passer and Brady.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that's a good point.
Because if it's the 70s rules, Brady gets no chance. Yeah.
Brady would be out of the game. That's right.
But even if you call it somewhere in the middle, they're still going to put pressure on him, right? Like you said. And
no question.
There's a great point by the Giants. Giants did it twice to the Patriots.
That's right.
So yeah, I'm with the Steelers. winning this game too.
I am too. The only caveat I'll throw out there, okay, this is the only caveat, which I don't think it's going to sway my decision. But if you look at the Patriots have Adam Vinatieri, right? He was 31 of 33 in field goals that year, okay, which is pretty darn good. And he missed, or he didn't miss any extra points. The Steelers kicker was Roy Gerela, okay. Roy Gerela made all but one of his extra points, but he was only 46% on his field goals. He was 12 of 26 on field goals. All right. Now, the Steelers didn't kick a lot of field goals. I mean, they didn't have to. Right. But if this game if it even got close to a field goal situation, either where the Patriots needed one to tie or win, or the Steelers needed one to tie or win, I would have to give the edge there to the Patriots. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to get to that point. I think the Steelers. I mean, gosh, there's nobody on the Patriots' offensive line that could block Joe Green, or Dwight White, or L.C. Greenwood. I mean, they couldn't block Michael Strahan and, Osi Umenyiora and Justin Tuck. And these guys, I'm sorry, as much as I love the Giants, these guys are way better than those three. Yeah. So, I see the Steelers winning this game, and I see it probably like 21-10.
21-10. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so we have a winner. We have our AFC champion would be the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers, with probably more Hall of Famers on that team than any other team in Super Bowl history, and they win that game 21-10 over the New England Patriots. So, the 1978 Steelers advance to the finals in our Super Bowl champions bracket. All right, let's go to the NFC side. Once again, let me review the seeds for you. The NFC side, our number 1 seed was the 1985 Chicago Bears. Our number 2 seed was the 1991 Washington Redskins. Our number 3 seed was the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. Our number 4 seed was the 1986 New York Giants. Our 5th seed was the 1966 Green Bay Packers. Our 6th seed was the 1977 Dallas Cowboys. Our 7th seed was the 1996 Green Bay Packers, and our 8th seed was the 1993 Dallas Cowboys. We're now at the semifinal bracket, the finals of the NFC, the advancers. The number 3 seed, 1989 San Francisco 49ers, taking on the 1986 New York Giants, who were the 4th seed. The 49ers of 89 advanced with a 31-21 win over the 1996 Green Bay Packers, and the New York Giants of 1986 advanced with a 17-6 win over the 1985 Chicago Bears. Nathan, you want to set our matchup for us?
The 86 Giants went 14-2, first in the NFC East. Coached by Bill Parcells, beat the 49ers in the divisional round that season, beat the Redskins in the conference championship, and they beat the Denver Broncos 39-20 in the Super Bowl. The 89 49ers were 14-2, first in the NFC West. Coached by George Seifert, they beat the Vikings in the divisional round, the LA Rams in the conference championship, and they beat the Broncos 55-10 in the Super Bowl.
All right, Joseph, take us away.
All right, so looking at this first glance, I just give the edge to the 49ers a little bit. I think that the Montana factor is a huge factor here.
Yes,
as we talked about in big games or Super Bowls, things like that. He's always going to come through as opposed to somebody like Phil Simms, who's a good quarterback, but largely is not nearly on the same level as Montana. I think that coaching-wise, to give the edge to the Giants, you've got Parcells and Belichick on the staff, as opposed to George Seifert, who at that point was really just trying to keep the Ferrari in the right lane from what Bill Walsh was able to do there before him. So, Montana arguably is the greatest quarterback of all time. A lot of people say Brady, but Montana's in the mix. And you got Jerry Rice, greatest receiver of all time. Then the Giants, you have Lawrence Taylor, maybe the greatest defensive player of all time. So you got a lot of superlatives here. But I do want to ask you about, obviously the 89 49ers never played the 86 Giants, but versions of those teams played each other in the 80s. Talk about those matchups a little bit.
Yeah, they did. And that's a good point. I mean, the Giants played the 84 Giants, which had a lot of these same players that are on the 86 Giants, went to San Francisco and played the 84 49ers, who ended up winning the Super Bowl in the divisional round, and gave the 49ers their toughest test that year in the playoffs. in 1985, I believe they played each other in 1985 as well. I'll have to double check on that. I think the Giants beat them in the first round of the playoffs and then advanced to the divisional round and were defeated by the Chicago Bears.
That's right.
Yeah.
85.
Yeah, so the Giants did beat them. And then the Giants beat them again in 86 when they won the Super Bowl. Beat them 55-3 or something like that.
49-3.
49-3, okay.
The year before that, they beat them 17-3.
17-3.
In 85,
So they beat them 2 years in a row there, which was pretty much the same 49ers team with the exception of Jerry Rice. Because remember, Jerry Rice just got there. Well, he got there in 85, yeah. So the 84 would be the only team that they didn't have Jerry Rice. The Giants have their number. I mean, the Giants are able to beat them. And again, it's with defense. We've talked about defense. The Giants had, we talked a little bit about the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line pressuring Tom Brady in that matchup. If you look at the Giants' defensive line, I mean, they had George Martin at left defensive end. They had Leonard Marshall at the right defensive end. They had Jim Burt at nose tackle. Burt basically knocked Montana out of a couple games. One in that 49-3 win, he pretty much ended it. Well, of course, ended the season because they lost in the playoffs, but pretty much hurt him for quite some time there. And then they knocked him out again in 89, I believe it was, or maybe 1990, when the Giants put an end to their their attempt to be 3 times in a row Super Bowl champions when they beat them out in San Francisco 15-13. So again, I see a situation here where I don't know that the 49ers offensive line is going to be able to block the Giants defensive line and keep them off Joe Montana. Offensively, I think the Giants have enough firepower when you look at some of the receivers they had and when you look at Joe Morris running the football, Maurice Carthon, Lee Rowson, Otis Anderson, Super Bowl MVP from Super Bowl 25, was on that 86 Giants team. So it's going to be a close game, but I guess I go to defense, and I just see the Giants' defense being a little bit too tough for the 49ers.
All right, so I disagree.
Okay, that's fine.
I think that the pass rush point you made there about the Giants' defense is good, and I think that the 49ers 49ers defense is nothing to sneeze at.
No, they're not.
As well, Charles Haley, Romanowski, Ronnie Lott, Matt Millen, a few other guys there. They're Super Bowl winning defense. I think that they're able to do some stuff against the Giants offense, whereas the other way around, you've got a very good Giants defense, but you've got arguably the greatest offense of all time. You've got Montana, Rice, John Taylor, who put up 55 points in the Super Bowl against John Elway's Broncos. Mm-hmm. So I think if you look at it, if you say, okay, the Giants' strength is their defense, 49ers' strength is their offense. Okay, let's look at the other side. I think the 49ers' defense is a little better than the Giants' offense. This is my opinion.
Okay. I mean, the 49ers' defense was 4th in the league overall in yards allowed. They were 11th overall in the league in passing yards allowed, and they were 3rd overall in the league in rushing yards allowed. All right, so those were their defensive ranks: 4th, 11th, and 3rd. Let's look at the Giants' ranks offensively. Mm-hmm. The Giants were 10th in yards. They were 17th in passing yards, and they were 6th in rushing yards. So kind of middle of the pack in total yards. And rushing and passing yards, and 6th in rushing yards. So I guess I see your point there. I mean, the 49er defense probably would have a pretty good matchup. Let's look at the flip side, though. Let's look at the Giants' defense. The Giants were 2nd overall in yards on defense. They were 19th against the pass, and they were 1st against the rush. So 2, 19, and 1. And then if we look at the 49ers, they were 1, 2, and 10 against the rush. So again, that tells me that the 49ers would have some success passing the football against the Giants. I'm not sure that they could run it real well against the Giants. And those 49er teams, and I think I mentioned this in one of our other broadcasts, those 49er teams, they kind of lulled you to sleep. I mean, they were able to do everything pretty well, and you couldn't really shut anything down. I think if the Giants were able to shut down their running game, I think they would have a little bit more success against the pass. But again, I'm willing to listen to your to your arguments on the 49ers.
Yeah. What about the kicking game? What do we have in the kicking game here?
Yeah, the kicking game I think was pretty even. I think if you look at the 49ers kicker was Mike Kofer. He was 80% on his field goals. The Giants kicker, Raul Allegre, was 75%. Kofer missed only 2 extra points. Allegre didn't miss any. So, pretty even field goal kicking. The 49ers punter, Barry Helton, averaged about 40 yards a punt. And the Giants had Sean Lundetta, who was considered one of the best punters in the league back then. And Lundetta averaged about 44.8 yards on a punt. So, again, pretty even on the kicking game.
Yeah.
It's a tough matchup.
Yeah. I just don't see Montana and Rice and company losing to Phil Simms Giants.
I want to go along with that. I mean, I don't think your argument is wrong there. I mean, I think you're talking about arguably the greatest quarterback in NFL history and definitely the greatest receiver in NFL history. Yeah. And then we mentioned this last week in our matchup when the 89 49ers were taking on the 96 Green Bay Packers. When you look at their let's go over to their offensive statistics. When you look at some of their players, I mean, Roger Craig and Tom Rathman were their leading rushers, but they were also right up there in receptions. I mean, Rice had 82 receptions. Second leading receiver was Rathman with 73 catches. Mm-hmm. John Taylor had 60 catches. Craig had 49. Mm-hmm. So they throw the ball, they mix it up quite well, and that's, I think I see your point, and I agree with it, that I think the 49ers offense is so varied and so multiple that they would have success keeping the Giants off balance, if that makes any sense. Yeah. With the number of weapons that they had. And then you mentioned their defense against the Giants. They had Charles Haley, Donnie Griffin at cornerback, Pierce Holt at left defensive end, Kevin Fagan at right defensive end, Matt Millen at linebacker. They had Mike Walter, and they still had Keena Turner. So, yeah, I mean, they had some really good players there. I mean,
let's say, you talked about Montana getting roughed up a little bit. Let's say they knock him out of the game. You got Steve Young.
Steve Young, that's true.
Nothing to sneeze at.
No.
The Hall of Famer in his own right coming in.
That's a good point.
I think they're... I give the edge to the 49ers.
Yeah, and Steve Young actually gives you more of a running threat than Montana did if you needed to. So I'm okay with that. And what would be your score then in that 49er win?
Say like maybe 24-14.
Okay.
24-20. Maybe even 24-21. It could be close.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay. Let's go 24-14. All right. So we have a winner on the NFC side. The 1989 San Francisco 49ers, the third seed in the NFC, defeat the 1986 New York Giants 24-14. And that sets up our finals matchup for the greatest Super Bowl champion of all time. And our next show, we will have both of them 3 seeds. And the AFC representing the AFC, the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers, will be taking on, representing the NFC, the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. So remember, we want to mention before we have our final show, which will be our finals matchup, engage with us on our Twitter account. You can find us at PressBoxPod. That's our Twitter account. We'd like to hear from you. I think the bracket is up on Twitter, so you can give us some comments about your bracket. Give us some comments about some teams that maybe you thought we should have left out, kind of like we did with the World Series bracket. And we'll be putting our poll up so that you can take a look at that as well. We look forward to doing our finals matchup to come out with the greatest Super Bowl champion of all time. Any final thoughts, Joseph, on what we've done so far?
I think that this finals matchup is definitely interesting because you basically have, it's like when you say the unstoppable force meets an immovable object, the steel curtain defense,
right?
Perhaps the greatest defense of all time, versus that 49ers offense we talked about,
right?
With Montana, one of the greatest offenses of all time. So I look forward to breaking that down.
Yeah, and I don't want to steal any thunder from our next show, which will be our finals matchup show, but I see this, my initial thought, I see this a little bit like what we just talked about. I mean, you're going to have a Steelers defense against a 49ers offense, which at first glance you might say push, advantage push, right? But if you look at the Steelers offense against the 49ers defense, I think the Steelers offense is measurably better than the 1986 Giants offense was. So that'll be where our discussion probably centers itself. But yeah, we've enjoyed this show. We've enjoyed bringing it to you. And remember, make sure you stay tuned, because our next show, we will determine the greatest Super Bowl champion in the last 54 years. And once again, our matchup on the AFC side, the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers, arguably one of the greatest football teams in history, against the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. Should be a good show.